Hi, Melody.
Hi, Kelsey.
I'm so happy to have you here. One, because I haven't seen your face in so long with our very full lives that we're living right now. And two, just I know that we're going to find some sweetness in what we share today. Before we get into that, let's start with our meditation like we always do. And this is a somatic experiencing exercise. We're going to do that today. For our listeners who are used to doing the meditations with me, sometimes I change it up a little bit. This is the one that we do most often. And basically what we're going to do is just let our eyes wander. And as we let our eyes wander around the space, you can let your head move by following your eyes. So your head is just going to be in movement with your eyes, checking out your space around you and being curious about what you see and what you feel drawn to. And as you let your eyes wander, and they may land on one or two things that hold your curiosity, just notice how the body responds to those things. Notice how the body is responding to you, taking in your space and your surroundings. This is called orientating. So we're literally orientating ourselves to the space that we're in, which is very calming to our nervous system. And then let your eyes land on something that really draws your attention. Just let your eyes rest and sort of let your eyes also engage their peripheral vision. And your breath may or may not have opened up a little bit. Now I'll invite you now to close your eyes and bring your head back to center if it's not there already. And just allow your body to feel where it is in this space, whether you're standing or sitting. Feel that what is connected to the floor or your chair. Feel your feet. Feel your feet, your seat, and your heartbeat. And if your breath hasn't already naturally deepened, I'm going to invite you now to take a few deep breaths. Just drawing the attention into this moment, into yourself, into the body. Giving yourself just a couple moments to slow down and just be. And we'll slowly open the eyes. I don't think I could start this, these interviews without doing that first. That, just so everyone knows, all the listener knows, the meditation is just as much for me and the person I'm interviewing as it is for all of you. So I am just tickled to say welcome to Melody today. She is a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, massage practitioner, an amazing foodie. Every time I see her make food, even if it's just for herself, it tends to be very beautiful. A nature enthusiast, which I like to call an outdoors woman, wild dancer, wave rider, integrative medicine student. She's currently studying Chinese medicine in Victoria, BC. She's a vocal explorer, Ariel silk acrobat, and a bold lover of life. I love all of those things, and I'm just so excited to see you. Nicole and I met many years ago in Tofino, British Columbia, surfing and dancing and exploring nature and food. And we were sort of both just starting to explore this path of yoga, this path of healing and self-inquiry. And it's been so much fun to stay in touch over the years as we both grow and sort of really step into the person we're here to be, the woman we're here to be. So welcome. Thanks for being here. Do you have anything else that I missed out in that introduction that you'd like to add at all?
Wow, that was great.
Good. So the reason why I'm excited to chat with Melody today is because I'm going to try my best to call you Melody. Nicole slips out. When I first met her, she was calling me Nicole, which is her middle name, and she just a few years ago went back to Melody, and I just love Melody. I just feel is so much you, and but sometimes that might slip out, but I'll do my best. And we can use both. Yeah. So Melody has had a really beautiful life experience around anxiety and depression, and she has really used some beautiful tools that she's going to talk to us about today. And she actually teaches every once in a while workshops using yoga and Chinese medicine and sort of elemental or earth-based healing practices to really address those issues which are so common and so rampant in our Western culture these days, and especially with women who we see wearing so many hats: mother, lover, wife, student, entrepreneur. You know, there's so many things. When I ask and talk to women, you know, they've got all these things they're doing, and I would just love to hear where that began, where you first started noticing. I know we've talked a little bit how it's been a lifetime of exploration for you around these things. So I'd love for you to just dive in to your story around that and how you first noticed it and what you started to do to work through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you mentioned, it's been a lifetime, maybe even before. I would say that, like, in my recollection now of my experience, it started in my teens. And kind of showed up, I would say, as a physical sensation of like a buzzing. Like I just sensed that there was a disconnection somewhere in my body. And I believe that this began from a few compounding traumatic experiences. And I started to seek answers. So I started to explore yoga, meditation. The natural world supported, excuse me, that like deep integration of rest in my nervous system. And once I started to explore that in my body, I wanted more. So I went to study, and I think as it naturally goes when you are a sensitive person, you want to help others. So as I started to see, oh, this seems to be doing something, how can I support others in it? So I went and studied yoga and yoga therapy. And the yoga therapy was really a big piece for me because we were guided through a program that broke down specific elements of pain, I'll just say, to simplify it, and dove deep into those concepts. And the concepts that really worked for me were more of the psychological understanding of anxiety and depression, because it was my own experience, my lived experience. So that's where I started to explore more in the realms of anxiety and depression, and study with teachers in the States. And that's what comes into my work mostly is those tools of, like you say, like grounding and really feeling safe in our bodies. Because that was a huge piece for me. It was like, I have this body, I have this mind, but I don't necessarily feel like I inhabit it or I feel safe in it. How can I feel more supported in living in my body?
And you said that it started as a teenager, and I feel like that is a I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I really feel, I know for me, I mean, I feel like some of it started a little bit before then, but teenagehood was super hard for me, as it is for many, And I just love to hear what your experience of anxiety was then, and then we'll dive into it, maybe more of what it is as your adult self. But what was it like for you as a teenager?
So from what I can remember,
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of dissociation in my teenage years. From what I can remember, it was this feeling of, especially around school exams and performance, this sense of like disconnection where I could not resource, I could not find ground. So I feel like I was like literally lifting off of the earth. Again, that buzzing sensation where I just like wasn't sure if things were going to be okay. You know, like if I don't really feel my body right now, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to make it from A to B. There was a lot of like, I think there was a lot of protection around like social situations where I would kind of be an extrovert, like present myself to feel safe, but actually underneath was a lot of insecurities. So social experiences were really hard. I like to spend a lot of time alone with my horse, nature. I just couldn't, like, my friends would go for a weekend away and I could only kind of handle 2 days. That was like, okay, I need some quiet space now. That was mostly how it showed up.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned earlier too that you are a very sensitive person. Like you feel the world in a very tangible way. And I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit more, because I really feel that is something that is almost innate when it comes to women, how when we really do allow ourselves to feel, we feel a lot. And for some of us, that happens more naturally, and for some of us, we've just shut it way down. But I have noticed in my own sort of research and theorizing that those of us who feel things more and experience things more on a more intense level, we do develop things like anxiety and depression, because it's almost like our system has been overwhelmed so easily. And so I'd love for you to speak a little bit to that too, if that's something you recognize when you were younger, but also something that you still recognize in yourself now.
Yeah, I think of a story that my mother told me throughout my childhood, where I had a family of 4 siblings, and so it was a very busy family. And I would be breastfeeding, and I could not focus on feeding when the room was full of energy. There were other people in the room, like I would just like pull off the breast and like look around with like big eyes. And I think that like that was my spirit. My spirit was very highly attuned to other people's energy. But also then, the conditioning, the experiences of life increased that. So I feel like it's definitely a gift as well as a curse. Because it's hard to navigate a very stimulated world when you're very sensitive. But if you have the practices that can support that grounding and connection to your own internal body and your own skin, then it's beautiful to be able to tap into that expanded awareness. Or at least be able to flow.
Yeah. So what are some of the practices that you use sort of on a daily basis that help you navigate that? Because I know for myself, it's still a practice that I need to do daily. So I'd love to hear what your practices are around navigating. being so pretty much, I mean, it's like it's being empathic. Like you're able to feel a lot and connect with a lot.
Yes, it is a daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say my most powerful commitment is meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I've experimented with not having a meditation practice, and it's fine. It's okay. I survive. But I just feel more alive, and I feel more connected and able to navigate the changing tides of life with something that I know is going to bring me back to spaciousness, so that I'm not so identified with the contraction in my body and the separateness, my ego self, and the stories that I'm telling myself. If I can drop even for just a few moments into something bigger, I'm able to feel more embodied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So any real embodiment practice for me, so like literally running is great. Like I feel my feet on the earth, I feel my muscle tissue, that connects me.
Mm-hmm.
A yoga practice, my yoga practice has really changed over the years, especially in the last 2 years since I've been a full-time student. I don't have the time to devote to hours and hours of practice like I did in my early 20s. But really, the yoga practice for me, it's so easy for me to dissociate. It's so easy for me to just check out and go through the motions. I've been practicing yoga since I was 15 years old. You know, it's very known in my body. But to actually be present is like very challenging. So anything that really calls me into presence in my body, Five Rhythms Dance does that for me powerfully, because I can't get away with checking out. Like a moment to moment experience. Surfing, anything that really like captures my attention.
Yeah, and brings you into that sort of focused attention. Yeah. I love that you speak to the fact that, because I've recognized that in my own yoga practice too, how and I think it is to any practice that you do, you can just kind of go through the motions. I mean, you can just sit on your cushion and meditate, quote unquote, for however many hours and not actually done the work. And I think there is a quality, and sometimes when we up the intensity of things, I know for me, because similar constitution to you, I can disassociate from my body so easy. That's my escape mechanism. I disassociate and I'm not in my body anymore. So anything that's a little bit more intense or uncomfortable and pushes that edge allows me to kind of get in there a little bit easier. I can be the same way with my practice, where I just end up being like, oh, I need to have a stretch and do that. And it's not meditative, and I'm literally just stretching. I'm not, even though I'm doing yoga poses, it's more like stretching. It's not that meditative place. So I know in the conversations we've had, you've had a few sort of pivotal moments in yourself where you've kind of been more like in a process of really having to work with the anxiety on like a daily basis. Like it's really up for you. And I would love to hear a little bit about that, like what happened and then how you were able to work through it, and sort of, you know, we talked about the good and the good, the bad, and the ugly around it.
Yeah. Where to start? So when I was 16, I got into a pretty bad car accident, which I almost died, and almost, because it was my fault, almost killed my best friend. So that was huge. There's a lot of coupling in that of like huge guilt, as well as that like stored impression on my nervous system. So guilt and shame, and you know, a lot of emotional connection there. So that was, I think, in my like teenage years, my first remembrance or connection to something isn't quite right. I'm feeling this anxiety. I didn't have any tools at that point to navigate that, but I did start to practice yoga and meditation, which helped me feel more alive and grounded. And then I guess I would say that that those practices helped me kind of keep the anxiety at bay.
Right. Yeah.
Like to live with it, because I think it's always been there. You know, I could probably trace it back even to earlier. I can trace it back to earlier experiences. But yeah, that helped me really move through the world in an okay way. And then another experience that was pivotal for me was living abroad in the United States and having some issues with border regulations, and love, and the loss of love, and really huge life decisions that I was really identified that I was having to make. So a lot of stress around making the right decision and having the power and control taken away from me in that. So those two moments in my life, in my adult life, were quite pivotal in experiencing anxiety. Do you want me to talk about my experience of depression as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, I know for me and the books I've read and what I've studied is anxiety and depression go hand in hand, and anxiety is just another form of depression, just similar but different.
Yeah. Yeah, so my understanding of depression through my experience is that it was sort of there all along underlyingly. And this experience really brought it to the surface, which now when I reflect on it, it's actually kind of a blessing because I was able to see something that was limiting my capacity to live in a full way. Didn't make it easy to be in that state of darkness and to feel those emotions, but for a long time I was denying the fact that I had these emotions and that they were in a spectrum of anxiety and depression, and I was sort of not consciously, but as a protective mechanism, putting on a mask of okayness so that I could feel safe, so that I could function. And so yeah, when I was in that state of making big life decisions and losing love, and I really experienced a sense of depression. And how that showed up for me was feeling a lot and not allowing myself to feel it. So I was like just trying to stuff it down, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It comes out in symptoms of depression. You know, I didn't want to be. I wanted to escape.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece to touch on, that putting on the mask to feel safe. So often we hear, you know, sort of ridicule around people pretending to be okay. And, you know, I do think there's sort of like an epidemic going on there where, especially with social media, you know, I can get into a whole sorts of rants around how everyone looks so amazing and their life is so great, and no one's ever really talking about the hard stuff. And then all of a sudden, which we just experienced in the Victoria community, and it's happened down here, you know, yoga teachers or other amazing teachers, they take their own lives, and people are so shocked. And that mask of okayness, it serves a purpose in that sometimes it just helps us keep going, and that's what we need to do. And it can be so damaging too to ourselves, because we're not necessarily allowing people, for one, to see what's actually going on, and two, therefore almost pushing away any potential of someone being able to really touch that part of ourselves that needs that loving support, because people don't know what's going on. So there's sort of this like paradoxical thing that I see happening of sometimes for me, I know too, with all the health challenges I've been having in the last 2 years, I don't want to say that I'm not okay. One, I don't want to have the conversation about it. I don't want sympathy because I'm doing everything I can to be better and be okay. And I just don't want to talk about it anymore. So there's that piece. And there's also the piece of like, that's what kind of gets me through my day. Sometimes it's just like, I'm okay, I'm good, you know? And so I think that, you know, we need to honor that mask of okayness that people do. And I also believe that when we can really open ourselves up and do our own work, it's easier to recognize when someone is just having that mask of okayness, and we're able to touch into that. And I think that also speaks to the work that you now do or have been doing over the last few years with people. So I'd love to hear about that, how moving from your experience into really offering a place. I mean, you do yoga workshops for depression and anxiety. So you're offering a real, like, that's a real place. You're not just doing a yoga workshop to help people feel good. You're addressing those very core issues. And so what was that like for you to, and I imagine, like you said, you had to own it. Like you had to do your work to be able to offer the work. So what was that like for you, moving from this place of you know, feeling really in it to offering support?
Mm-hmm. Terribly hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I question myself, like, why?
Yeah.
I choose to put myself through that because I think it's just a deeper calling that's beyond me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's that vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, can only speak from my experience, but it's so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So incredibly uncomfortable, and yet it's so powerful because there's a doctor, Dr. Kieran Sweeney, who talks about our work as healthcare practitioners is to go to the edge of the human experience with our patients.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do that for ourselves, you know. So for me, it was like, God, I have to go there because that's going to open up the potential for me to help and connect with others, which I'm so hardwired for connection. That's how, for me at least, how I feel most alive is connected to other people. And when I put on that mask, it's keeping me safe and it's serving a purpose, yet it's limiting me from really going to that place that is uncomfortable but beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's still like I get anxiety before I teach.
Yeah.
And I have all the myriad of negative self-talk. So that hasn't stopped for me, and I don't necessarily think that it will, but it's my relationship to it, and it's the tools that I have to be like, okay, yeah, I'm having this like self-defeating thought right now, but it's not who I am. I'm so much more than that. I know that, and I have these tools that I can help myself move through this with as much grace as I can. And sometimes it's really ugly and doesn't, you know, I show up to class and I do the best I can, and I hope that authenticity, you know, helps other people go there too. And sometimes I can't get to that level of authenticity and I'm just like surviving, and that's okay too. So I think it's a deeper calling where I wouldn't do it because it's not easy.
Yeah. What is like when you, I know in your workshops, you've mentioned how people are showing up and sharing their story of depression and anxiety, and there's an open conversation in a group of basically strangers. Some people might know each other or they might know you, but I know sometimes a lot of people haven't met each other. What is that like? Like what happens in those moments when people are able to have a safe space to openly share about what their experience is, anxiety or depression?
So the framework in which I teach is not a lot of sharing.
Okay.
There's a few reasons for that. I'm not a psychotherapist and I don't have the tools to support that kind of discourse. I kind of want to work within my scope of practice. I'm a yoga therapist and I can, you know, work within that realm. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any sharing. I definitely leave space at the beginning of end of our workshops for, an experience, like a short share. And it's really beautiful. It's you can usually feel the energy in the room, kind of like everyone just takes a little bit of a breath and arrives. And there can be tears, there can be laughter, there can be comfortableness, it's the full spectrum of the human experience. And then usually after that we go right into practice, so that changes. It's like, okay, here we open up a little bit, and then we go into the practice that help regulate and get back, so it's not overwhelming, because I don't a group of 25 people or 20 people or 15 people all experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression, we don't want it to be too overwhelming.
Yeah. And I love that too. I feel like the embodiment practices, which are getting more and more recognition, even in the psychotherapy world, but it's been in the yoga world for a long time. We know that these embodiment practices that help through yoga practice, meditation, breathing, that help regulate and rewire our systems they're so powerful. And so one thing I've noticed, in my realms of offering yoga and somatic experiencing, like sometimes in somatic experiencing, we don't talk, we just do, and that is, I find it very refreshing. Because generally, not always, but generally people who have had these experiences have talked about them a lot. And sometimes talking about it doesn't always, it almost can sometimes exacerbate the problem. And so I love that it is basically like, we're going to do this work, we're going to do this movement, we're going to do this breathing, and we're just going to see how that changes things for you. And I find it's just really, you said it's almost like you can have a whole complete experience when you get together in a group and everyone's there exploring the same thing, even if you don't talk about it, can be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you are studying now Chinese medicine. Yes. And I feel, I don't know a ton about Chinese medicine, but for myself, Chinese herbs and acupuncture have helped me tremendously. They're my two main go-to modalities right now. And I'd love for you to just speak a little bit. I know you did, I follow you obviously on social media. I know you did your thesis from this last year around the nervous system and around trauma, and I'm curious to see how that weaves into Chinese medicine and what you sort of came up with. Obviously, I didn't get to read your paper, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a really cool topic when we can sort of integrate, more. I know you read a lot of books by the modality that I'm studying right now, somatic experiencing, and so I'm really curious as to how the trauma and the anxiety and the nervous system fits together with Chinese medicine, or what you discovered in your findings.
I will post that on my blog, that research paper. It's a bit long, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, it's fascinating, and it's like I've really just scratched the surface, and I feel like everything it's sort of baby steps. I'm just sort of getting into the juiciness of this work, this body of work that's so vast and so many angles to look at it. And it's slightly hard to describe if you're not a Chinese medicine practitioner, but I can do my best.
Okay.
And I'll kind of start with the work of the needles and how they affect the nervous system. So when you insert an acupuncture needle into the body, it affects the fascia. And the fascia is this like connective tissue that interweaves through every single portion of your body from head to toe. And when you insert a needle into this tissue, it creates space. And when in Chinese medicine, we say that pain is a lack of space, or we would say stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the insertion of the needle creates that little, tiny bit of space in the body, and that gives a nervous system impression. There's nervous tissue that interweaves with all the fascia. So it's increasing space. Also, there's a lot of research on like its effect of like the neurohormonal pathways to the brain, and effect of the hypothalamus pituitary axis, and our ability to downregulate from our limbic center of emotional response and activate more of a parasympathetic state by using the needles.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a branch of Chinese medicine called 5 elements acupuncture. And in the words of Lonnie Jarrett, who's a former teacher in 5 element or constitutional acupuncture, it's a disruption trauma, any sort of impact to the body, mind, spirit, is a disruption of the heart and the kidney axis. And this is like a dysregulation between the fire and the water element.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be something, a blog post to come, or people can research more on, but it's a disruption of this elemental association in the body, a disconnection between the upper body and the lower body. And there's ways to work with that with acupuncture and with herbs, and mostly it's somatic practices that help you to reconnect your ability to stay inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I know a lot of our listeners are versed in different trauma therapies. We talk about it a lot, and that makes a lot of sense. And I know for a lot of women who have had sexual trauma in their life, that disconnect from upper and lower body is huge. And to know that is sort of what happens anyway with any sort of trauma, that sort of disconnect of that access happens, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And, with my limited knowledge, that I love Chinese medicine, and I research it for fun sometimes, just because it makes a lot of sense to me, as does Ayurveda, as does all these ancient practices that really look at the systems of the body, in all realms, energetic, physical, all of them, emotional. That makes a lot of sense to me. It makes so much sense to me. That's really cool to know. So with I'd love, just with like that, and then also just what we've talked about before with the anxiety and things like that, like if you could give our listeners, even just, obviously go get acupuncture, find a Chinese medicine practitioner, like, yes, go do that. It's amazing. And, somatic experiencing and all those things. But what are some things that people can do at home? I'm sure you have many things, but if you could pare it down to like, if you have someone who's completely overwhelmed and they just need one thing to get them going, or 1 or 2 things that they can sort of start with to help them start to navigate their anxiety or depression or what they're dealing with. And I know that's a hard question, because really you want to see the individual, and we're all unique in how that's expressing. But if there is any tools that you could leave us with around that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I can try. Yes, definitely yoga and Chinese medicine are holistic practices. So we have, practitioner has to look at the whole being and the whole, the whole story. But I would say, like, if I could really like wean it down, it would just be to feel your body. So something very simple as like feeling your feet. If you have a practice of arriving home and you feel very disconnected, you feel very anxious, there's like heart palpitations, or you're sweating, or a range of symptoms, if you could just literally stand on your feet and feel them on the ground. you're in a bank line and you're waiting and you're feeling anxiety rise, or energy move in your body that feels uncomfortable, and you not try to jump from the experience or get out of your body, but rather get into your body and feel your feet on the ground. And with that, I think a lot of the experience of anxiety and depression is not allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling. Right? Like, this is too much. I don't want to feel this. So I'm going to either check out or have this visceral experience symptomatically so that I can feel safe. So anything that helps you to feel more. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's so hard.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's so hard. I'm having this, I'm in this process right now where I'm having this new layer of healing come up and it's about this relationship I have to sleep and how sleep is not safe for me. I never, I struggled with insomnia when I was a kid and as a teenager, and just recently in the last few months, working with my therapist and working through everything I'm going through, this is the next layer. And so I'll be so tired. And as soon as my head hits the pillow, it's like a physical reaction. I'm like, what? I'm tired. Like it's not even mental. It's just this physical old trauma that's been stored in my body. My heart starts pounding and I start getting really restless. And sure enough, I have nights where I'm like, oh, I just want to sleep. And I try and disassociate from that and just like try and make myself sleep. I stay up for hours. But if I lie on my belly and I breathe and I just feel my body, eventually I fall asleep a lot quicker. But it's so hard and so uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable. Also like the most powerful transformational work. Even just for a microsecond, be able to feel yourself.
Yes.
And like you said, like Kelsey, I love that about just to breathe into your belly. The breath is, in Chinese medicine, we often hear the translation of qi as energy, which is kind of not correct. When you look back to the classics, it's actually air is the like direct translation, and air is breath. Air is life. It's life force. So qi is this life force moving through you, that like kind of has this electric sensation. But the breath it's the gateway in. It's everything. And yeah, my experience of breath, it's changing all the time, but it's not easy. It gets stuck. It gets stagnated, and it's got an emotional connection. And I think breathing practices, may it be pranayama or just simply noticing your breath, really powerful.
Beautiful. Yes. Big fan of breath work. Big fan of working with the breath. Yes. Well, great. I love that. And we are going to be posting Nicole's info. She has let us know that she's taking a break this fall from teaching, which I just really want to mention because it just shows her dedication to herself and where she's at with the heavy course load of becoming a Chinese medical traditional Chinese medical doctor. An acupuncturist, it's a big, there's lots of stuff there. Like you said, that whole world is so vast. There's so much you can learn. So she's not going to be teaching anytime soon, but you can go to her website, sign up for her newsletter, and also we'll post her Instagram account so you can follow her and her life and how she takes care of herself as she goes along. And when she does have events or workshops come up, they will be posted. And I'm just excited to stay in touch with you. And I'm really, I'd love to stay in touch. And as you dive deeper into that heart-kidney axis around trauma and the nervous system, and when you I'm sure, sounds like you're going to be gathering more and more information and diving into that more. I feel like that would be a great episode to have, just bringing more of that Chinese medicine into, and the teachings from that whole amazing system into that trauma work that is becoming more and more recognized out there, that we're all recovering from something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about you or what you're going to be doing, or your work or anything like that before we go?
No, I think that's great, Kelsey. I just would love to read this beautiful poem if I can.
Yes, I would love that.
So this is one of my favorite pieces of writing by Mary Oliver, and it's been like a steady anchor for me throughout. Gosh, I think I probably heard it about 10 years ago at a yoga retreat, and it changed my life pretty much.
Beautiful.
And I'm sure many of your listeners have heard it, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again.
Not at all.
So it's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
Yes, I love that one. And poetry is not meant to be recited once and never again. It is definitely meant to be recited and read and contemplated and taken in. That's such a beautiful one. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing all of your beautiful wisdom. It was so nice to connect with you again and hear what you're up to. And I'm excited to hear more from you in the future.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.